is tourism now being neglected at the World Trade Organization? And does it matter? Okay. Now, to start out, the question is, what is the World Trade Organization? And a couple main points. First of all, the GATS is about flexibility. And I think the best example of the flexibility of the GATS agreement to accommodate governments' policy choices is the fact that you can have a schedule of commitments by the European communities, which is about 400 pages now. And that's only the EC25. We haven't seen the EC27 schedule. And the fact that, by contrast, there are least developed countries whose entire schedule of WTO services commitments is 1 page. About tourism in the WTO context, it's more complicated than goods because there are 4 different aspects, what we call the 4 modes of supply. First is cross-border. For example, I stay in Switzerland and provide a service. This could be a tour operator, a travel agency in Colombia that provides services to foreigners that are coming to the country. Consumption abroad, where the tourist goes and consumes the service, the traditional way of looking at tourism. But also commercial presence, investment, a hotel or a travel agent that establishes abroad, for example. And extremely important, the movement of natural persons. When a restaurant chef or a hotel manager moves from one country to another country to work. All of these aspects must be taken into consideration, not only in terms of the WTO negotiations, but I would argue in terms of creating a successful or competitive tourism policy. Another very important point, the lack of political influence. If we look at the economic importance of tourism, and we look at the attention that tourism is getting or not getting in the current WTO negotiations, there is a great contrast. Now, on one hand, you would say, what is the problem? Tourism has the greatest number of commitments, and I apologize, it's hard to read, but tourism is the biggest bar on the left. And the light color is developed countries, and the dark color is developing countries, which are 80% of the members of the WTO. The point here is that on the surface, it looks as though tourism is already well taken care of. It has the greatest number of commitments, followed by other infrastructure services such as financial services, telecommunications, and business services. Okay. And if we look at the current round of negotiations in terms of the participation, what we call the offers that member governments make for new liberalization, improving their existing commitments or making new subsectors. Tourism with a circle does fairly well also. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is that the traditional definition used by most members of tourism is extremely limited. Hotels and restaurants, travel agencies and tour operators, and tourist guides. What about the helicopters? What about the buses? What about, is tourism currently being neglected? Okay. One good indication is the fact that the most recent WTO document specifically about tourism negotiations dates back to 2004. Okay. Those new offers that we showed are primarily modest improvements of existing commitments, nothing earth-shaking or fundamental. The plurilateral negotiations, which are when a group of countries negotiates with another group of countries about a sector. Only very recently, a few months ago, has tourism been included. These plurilateral negotiations started 2 years ago. Okay. And the Tourism Friends Group is where groups of governments, representatives get together to talk about the important issues, has only recently been organized as well. I have 2 more slides, and thank you for your patience, Jeffrey. What are some of the potential issues that are not being addressed or are insufficiently being addressed in my personal view? Linkages between tourism commitments and poverty alleviation. As we know, improving tourism does not guarantee improved levels of poverty alleviation. It's much more complex than that. Okay? The role of GATS commitments in promoting sustainable tourism development. I would add, especially from the infrastructure aspects. Tourism checklist, looking at tourism from a broader perspective, all of these subsectors and areas which affect tourism, not just hotels and restaurants or travel agents and tour operators and tourist guides. Okay? Examining the offers on the basis of this expanded classification. Okay? My last slide, the Mode 4 aspects, the movement of people, recognition of qualifications. Many professionals are not able to, from developing countries especially, are not able to get their qualifications recognized. The links with air transport. Obviously, without air transport, tourism, in many cases, international tourism, is almost meaningless. Okay. Technical standards. Okay. Travel warnings. Okay. The history of, for example, Kenya or some of the Philippines or some of the other areas which have been devastated, at least temporarily, by travel warnings which may not have been the best developed.